It all started right after I bought a house with a yard. My husband and my mother-in-law were all smiles as they made an unsolicited declaration of moving in. They're saying they're gonna move in too. If you don't like it, you can just divorce my son. If the mother-in-law is coming, that means sister-in-law of mine will surely follow. They know full well I'd hate this, and yet, here we are. The harassment that's bound to continue even after moving. I couldn't help but shudder. I don't want this. I'm not planning to live with you guys. You seem to not know your place. My mother-in-law raised her eyebrows in disbelief. What she pulled out next was a divorce paper. Already signed by my husband. Her face red clear as day, all she cared about was getting the house. Their plan worked out terrifyingly well. I struggled to suppress my laughter. How I must have looked, trembling and looking down. My mother-in-law appeared victorious. I solemnly signed the divorce papers, packed my bags, and left that dreadful in-laws house behind. The day I moved out, I got a nasty call from my former mother-in-law. You've realized it now, haven't you? The former mother-in-law was insisting we meet to talk. Exactly what I wanted. I'd go and give her a piece of my mind. After meticulous planning to put them in their place, I was on my way to the showdown. My name is Tatiana. I work as an office worker at a marketing agency. It was the department head of a newspaper company who introduced me to Ken. Unable to reject the department head's offer due to my vulnerable position. At 29, I ended up marrying Ken after a 6-month courtship, overwhelmed by his persistence. I would curse myself for a long time for making a wrong decision at such a critical moment. From the start, I believe my mother-in-law intended to deceive me. She seemed calm and kind, but once I became her daughter-in-law, she showed her true colors. She dropped the facade of an understanding older woman to reveal the demon mother-in-law beneath. Hey, Tatiana! What are you dragging your feet for? Didn't I tell you to weed the garden after you're done with the dishes? There wasn't a single day the screeching voice of my mother-in-law didn't fill the in-laws' house. I was daily filled with dread. Barely managing a sigh in response was all I could muster. After marrying, I reluctantly agreed to live with my husband's family at his insistence. His father had passed away from illness, and his mother had been suffering from a limp for years. He begged me, saying he couldn't bear to leave his elderly mother alone in their old home. But once we moved in, what do you know? The supposedly pained mother-in-law was walking around just fine, claiming it was her duty to train me, harshly, every day. And my husband? No better. Even when I expressed a desire to live separately, he would find an excuse to avoid it. Always under his mother's thumb. Never standing up for me when his mother scolded me. I'm sorry, my family's got quite the temper. Don't just stand there smiling, help me. I'm really struggling here. After the marriage, I started feeling intense anxiety and depression. I'd find myself crying unexpectedly or suddenly feeling sick. After seeing a specialist, I was diagnosed with an adjustment disorder. Realizing how negatively living with my in-laws' family was impacting me was truly disheartening. My mother-in-law, uncaring of how I felt, continued to make unreasonable demands. Don't you dare slack off just because it's your day off. Have you finished cleaning the room? You haven't even gone shopping yet? Make sure you check the sales before you go. Please stop rushing me. I have a headache. I'll make sure to clean and do the shopping later. Don't be so lazy. Do as you're told. You're a daughter-in-law, aren't you? I wish I could have told her a daughter-in-law is not a maid. Her demands were mostly about the house itself. Clean out the gutters, replace the paper on the sliding doors, deal with the splinters on the pillars. Our family home is really old and falling apart at the seams. When the wind blows, it creaks and sways. Each time it happens, my mother-in-law hurries my husband, begging him to quickly set up a new home. This place is a rental, you know. We're renting it cheap from an acquaintance. Don't you want to live freely in your own home for once? Don't you think so, Ken? I do, but with what I take home, a dream house is just a dream. My mother-in-law, frustrated with her ineffective son. Of course, her irritation is taken out on me, his wife. Cook, clean, weed the garden, take her to the doctor. I'm exhausted from working full-time, but she couldn't care less. It'd be strange if I didn't end up sick. That's how I felt every single day. Half a year after moving into my in-laws' house, a woman came along to make my tough life even tougher. My sister-in-law, Yasmin, returned home after her divorce, bringing her child with her. She was kicked out after saying, "I never want to see your face again." Well, it was my fault. I neglected my child and slept with my husband's colleague. What on earth is wrong with this woman's morals? Seeing me appalled, Yasmin smirked. Just like her mother, Yasmin's actions mirrored her looks. She refused to do any housework and even had me clean her room. Can't help it, right? I'm raising a child. You wouldn't understand since you've never had one. It's harder than it looks. So, I'm counting on your support. Yasmin doesn't work. She lounges around all day. Taking care of her child is an afterthought at best. She just lies on the sofa, doing nothing. Her behavior on weekends is the worst. She leaves her young daughter with me and goes off to the gambling parlor. Apparently, Yasmin has bad company, as she sometimes gathers with them to drink from noon. She doesn't help with the housework at all, a true freeloader. Yasmin would do anything to get money for her leisure. Here's what happened one day. Yasmin handed me a drawstring bag, and when I asked what it was, "That's from her dad. Jewelry, and such." What? What do you expect me to do with this? You're so slow. Sell them. And make sure you get a good price, okay? My deceased father's belongings. Essentially all that was left of him. And she's asking me to sell them nonchalantly. It made me sad. Thinking of her using the money for gambling made it even worse. I just couldn't do it, so I explained the situation and handed the whole bag over to Ken. What he did with his father's keepsakes, I don't know, nor do I want to. So many things happened around the time Yasmin came back. My things started to disappear frequently. And it was around then I found out Ken might be cheating. My friend who works at a different company happened to see him on a day off, walking arm in arm with a flashy-looking young woman. I was furious when I heard, "I'm working hard even on my days off, and you're out having fun with some young girl? That's cheating, isn't it? Who is she? Tell me the truth." "It's not cheating. She's just a girl from a strip club." "And how is that okay? Can't you, a married man, stay away from places like that?" Yasmin watched our exchange, laughing uproariously. As for my mother-in-law, she seemed disappointed but didn't criticize Ken much. According to her, a husband's visit to such places is a sign of his wife's lack of dedication. Getting all worked up over that, how embarrassing. The fault is yours. If you'd been more attentive to Ken, none of this would have happened. I don't agree at all. Isn't that a bit unreasonable? In this house, that's normal. And you know, visiting strip clubs or cheating is like a man's proof of ability. A wife should forgive such things with a big heart. What a failure of a wife. My common sense seemed to be their nonsense. Forgive visits to strip clubs or cheating? Impossible. My frustration only grew. I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. To change this unpleasant situation, I decided to take some action. Yet, my mother-in-law and Yasmin remained the same as ever. Day in and day out, they treated me like some kind of servant. Lying around on the sofa and floor like seals, the two of them would raise their voices the moment they felt hungry. "Hey! Why isn't lunch ready yet? It's already noon." Don't dilly-dally. Seriously, you're so slow it's frustrating. Well, why don't you make it yourselves? I've been cleaning the yard and shopping without a moment's rest, you know? Don't talk back. Do you even understand your place as a daughter-in-law? It seems even having an opinion isn't allowed. Frankly, I was fed up. I wanted a divorce, and fast. But if it were that easy, I wouldn't be in this mess. The person who introduced me to my husband was a manager at a newspaper company we both respected. I had even been asked by my boss not to do anything that would embarrass him. Infuriatingly, my mother-in-law knew this all too well and often used it against me. I was completely trapped. For a while, all I could do was endure. Then one day, my husband's infidelity became an undeniable fact. A colleague from a competitor caught him red-handed. This was the first step in my preparation. I had to make the next move. About a month later, I think. After dinner, my sister-in-law spread out a housing catalog on the table. It was unmistakably the one I had kept in my bag. Look at this. Looks like Tatiana was planning to buy a house. Wait. You went through my bag? Why would you do that? Just be quiet. Oh? It's a bit rural but looks like a nice house. Hey, Tatiana. You should have consulted me about this. The house I had my eye on was a detached house with a yard. Just as my mother-in-law said, it was in the countryside but a pretty nice property. I had already visited the place a few times and met with the real estate agent. When I opened up about it, the three of them finally took the bait. What? You've gone that far in discussions? You're buying it? It's cheap and spacious, not bad at all. Ken, a man needs to have guts. But, a house with a yard, huh? That's a tough decision. If you're going to be the man of the house, Mom's behind you. I might even help out a bit. Weren't you planning to move out and live with just the two of you? Before I even had to do anything, my mother-in-law was egging my husband on. What a hypocritical way to put it. As if they'd let me off that easily. When I asked who would be the owner, my husband frowned. I'm the head of the household, aren't I? It's gonna be in my name, of course. So, we're moving forward with this? Buying this house and moving out together? All right, I get it. I'm a man too. Let's buy that house. Hurry up with the arrangements. My husband finally made up his mind. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law praised his decision. But I didn't miss it. I saw the two of them exchange knowing smiles. A few days later, right after we bought the rural house with a yard, my husband and mother-in-law, all smiles, made an unsolicited declaration of moving in. Mom is moving in too. What? But, we were supposed to move out and live on our own. After thinking it over, we decided to live together after all. You wouldn't say no, right? If you do, you're looking at a divorce. Wonder what your boss would say. There it was. Such a cowardly tactic. If the mother-in-law was coming, there was no way her obnoxious daughter wouldn't follow. Imagining the harassment that would surely continue at the new place, I shivered. Absolutely not. I have no intention of living with you guys, not even a little. What? What are you talking about? You don't seem to understand your place. My mother-in-law's anger was visible. A vein throbbing at her temple. What she pulled out was a divorce form. Already signed by my husband. Her face said it all, as long as she got the house, nothing else mattered. If you really hate it that much, here. Sign this. Fine, I will. I'll sign it. I want a divorce. I've had enough. Hey, Tatiana. Really, you okay with this? Ken, let her be. A snobby and useless woman like her, living together would only make my blood boil. You're young, you'll find another wife soon enough. Such cruel words. I solemnly signed the divorce papers. My mother-in-law was triumphant. She had no idea how I was feeling. The plan worked out scarily well. I was desperately trying to hold back my laughter. A few days after I moved into my new apartment, my phone kept ringing with calls from my ex-mother-in-law. Checking the calendar, it was just as I thought. Today was their moving day. You've realized it by now. The phone kept ringing non-stop. Classic ex-mother-in-law behavior. Despite ignoring it, she kept calling. I answered the call out of sheer annoyance. She started yelling without even a greeting. You! How could you do this to us? What kind of a place did you trick us into buying? Long time no see. Please, calm down. What are you talking about? I don't quite understand. Don't play dumb. This house. You knew it was defective and you bought it anyway, didn't you? That's it, isn't it? She was right. The house I chose had issues. The ground itself was weak, and the land often sank. Even new houses would sometimes have doors that wouldn't close after a few years. Apparently, there were mining tunnels running nearby, which caused the trouble. However, for locals, this was common knowledge. They built their homes on stable land. It was the carefree newcomers who suffered from troubles. This time, I used such a problematic house to trap those three. Colluding with the real estate agent to find a reasonably priced defective house was a struggle. Of course, having my ex-sister-in-law steal the real estate catalog from my bag was part of the plan. I deliberately placed my bag in an easy-to-steal-from spot. Unaware, the three of them fell right into the trap and moved out. Holding back my laughter while signing the divorce papers was difficult. I wanted to spill everything, but I couldn't. I feigned ignorance. A defective house? There's no way. Could it be a misunderstanding? What's with that tone? How dare you? Anyway, come over here right now. No, thank you. Honestly, I never want to see you guys again. What? What did you say? There's no way I'd want to meet that monster family again. Even if they offered me money, I'd refuse. Then my ex-husband came on the line. Hey, Tatiana. Please. Just try to understand us a little. Those words, I'm sending them right back at you. Ken, did you ever consider my feelings? You didn't, right? I've always been isolated, haven't I? I'm sorry. Hey, where are you now? Tell me where you moved to. As if I'd tell you. If you ended up coming over, I'd have to move again. Anyway, I want to cut ties with you guys. The discussion remained at a stalemate. Eventually, my ex-mother-in-law started making even more absurd claims. The divorce was invalid, and they were still family, she claimed. I had gotten signatures from Ken on the divorce papers and consulted with a lawyer to proceed with it. Is divorce invalid? Impossible. How far could their lack of common sense go? Anyway, just come and talk once. We're getting nowhere like this. Please. I'm asking you too, Tatiana. Just once, let's settle this properly. Okay? My ex-mother-in-law and husband insisted on meeting to talk. Even if I refused, they'd likely keep calling. At this point, there was no other choice. I'll meet them and give them a piece of my mind. Fine. I'll meet you once. Thank you. I really appreciate it. But I'll choose the place and time, okay? I didn't want to risk being ambushed or followed. I had to maintain the upper hand to avoid any further scares. After careful preparation, I called the three of them to a certain cafe. I arrived 20 minutes late to the cafe I had specified. My ex-mother-in-law and ex-sister-in-law were already furious. And my ex-husband wore a wry smile. Just as predictable as ever. How dare you make us wait? You're really beyond rude. I don't want to hear about manners from you. What do you want? What do you mean, what do you want? Because of you, we're stuck in a defective house. Take responsibility for your actions. I have no idea what you're talking about. It was your decision to move in together, wasn't it? My ex-mother-in-law was at a loss for words. Seems like she couldn't deny that. She and my ex-sister-in-law had jumped into the defective house situation by themselves. Their previous home had started undergoing major renovations. Meaning, their only option now was that defective house. If you're done, let me say something. I'm going to sue you for emotional distress and seek damages. Be prepared. What? Damages? Sue me? Why would you do that? Tell me exactly what I did to you. You drove me to the point of developing an adjustment disorder. I showed them a copy of the medical diagnosis I had received from the hospital. The three of them stared at it intently. Especially my ex-mother-in-law, whose eyes were wide as saucers. She probably never imagined I had seen a psychiatrist. You never consider how your harsh words affected others. It was really hard for me. I felt nauseous, tears would come, it was really tough. That's because you're too weak. It's your fault for being such a lousy daughter-in-law in the first place, isn't it? Isn't it? That too. You kept calling me a lousy daughter-in-law. You know, that's considered an insult, which can be punished in prison or a fine. What? That's an exaggeration. Exaggeration? My ex-mother-in-law doesn't understand. She doesn't realize how serious her actions were. The extent of her wrongdoing. You also committed criminal acts against me. Remember how you threatened to tell my boss about the divorce? That's blackmail. Come on. Aren't you being a bit dramatic? Not at all. You may end up in prison or a fine as well. I won't back down, you know? Wait. My ex-sister-in-law chimed in, her gaze sharper than usual. Maybe you'd call it a defiant look. Typical of a former delinquent. As if she wouldn't be intimidated by such threats. All I've heard so far is you taking advantage of our mom's ignorance to scare her. Do you have any proof of us insulting or blackmailing you? I do. Because I've been recording everything. Recording? Yes, I had been using the voice memo feature on my phone all along. I had recordings from my entire time at the ex-in-laws. There's quite a lot of audio. I prepared data extracting just the parts where I was verbally abused. Submitting this as evidence would almost certainly secure a conviction for both the insult and blackmail charges. Did you really think I would just take it? Not just you, mother-in-law, but you too, Yasmin. You'll likely be held accountable as well. What? Why me? What have I done to you? Think about it. Haven't you committed any crimes? Or are you going to say you never caused me any trouble? There's no way. Don't be ridiculous. My ex-sister-in-law insisted she was innocent. I showed her the screen of my smartphone. Her face turned pale instantly. No wonder. What was displayed was a scene of her rummaging through my bag. Looking around suspiciously as she searched through the contents. How disgraceful. What's that? How did you do? When did you even take that? Ever since you arrived, my things started disappearing frequently. My stuff, jewelry, clothes, bags. I set up a hidden camera. That's terrible. What are you doing, going so far? Appalling. Who's the one being inappropriate here? Shall I also tell you about the penalties for theft? I'll be contacting the police later. My ex-sister-in-law was speechless. Wanting to say something but unable to. She looked utterly helpless. I had a record of what had disappeared from my possessions. With an accurate grasp of the damage, the police and lawyers would be able to move more easily. When I decide to do something, I go all the way. I had decided I would never forgive these three. The last one to face was my ex-husband, who shrugged. Of all of them, he was the one I could forgive the least. I thought marriage was about helping each other. But Ken, it seems you had a different idea. From beginning to end, you were always against me. Enemy? I never intended that. Not even a little bit. Believe me. Even today, I was trying to mediate as best as I could. Sure. I've had enough of lies. I don't need any mediation. My ex-husband was a cowardly opportunist. Always siding with the stronger party. Just as he had always sided with my ex-mother-in-law and ex-sister-in-law. And even now. Trying to appease me in any way, hoping to be the only one forgiven. If he had been a bit more of a decent man, maybe I would have continued our marriage. If he had said we should live alone in a different place, I might have gone along. Your affair partner's name is Mariana, right? What? Why? How do I know? I had it investigated. I have a friend who's good at this kind of thing. I even have a photo of you and her entering a hotel together. Here, look. No! Don't show me! Please, don't! As I attempted to show him the phone screen, my ex-husband frantically tried to block it. He didn't want his mother and sister to see the evidence of his infidelity. As if it mattered. Morals and ethics had long been broken in this family of similar individuals. I put my smartphone and the copy of the diagnosis back into my bag. There was no more evidence that I needed to present to them. My ex-mother-in-law, ex-husband, and ex-sister-in-law seemed to have lost their will to fight. Afraid that if they did anything rash, they would be reported. Too bad, I was fully prepared to consult the police regardless of their actions. You can expect the police to visit you eventually. It's better not to run. Your crime might become more severe. And make sure you don't follow me. Understand? Tatiana! Don't be so cold. We were husband and wife until recently, right? Yes. Frankly, marrying you was a huge mistake. I feel relieved now that we're no longer married. If you follow me, I'll sue you for that as well. Don't wait outside my workplace. Don't contact me unless it's something really important. I made a few simple agreements with the three of them and left the cafe. After I exited, the three of them remained downcast. You can't lock a person's mouth. The story of our divorce and the reason being his infidelity and mistreatment of me spread quickly through his company. As a result, my ex-husband ended up being quite ostracized within the company. After all, the mediator had been a manager from a newspaper company we had dealings with. It was only natural that my ex-husband, having lost trust, would be viewed harshly. Unable to bear the discomfort, he eventually resigned. His attempts at finding a new job didn't go well, and his relationship with his mother and sister started to deteriorate. He appeared before me again about a year after our divorce. I was stopped by him on my way back from work, and there stood a disheveled man. Ken, I didn't recognize you at first. Yeah. People say I've changed a lot lately. He seemed to be struggling. Which was to be expected. Both his mother and sister were convicted and fined. And I had sued him for damages. They must be financially strained now. Especially with the loan for the defective house they live in. How are your mom and Yasmin doing? They're alive. Barely getting by. Both are working now. They have to make ends meet. They always say they want to go back to how things were. Want to go back to living off my and your earnings. Just like always. Parasites, I thought. Cutting ties was definitely the right decision. I expected him to retort, but he didn't. Instead, my ex-husband sighed deeply and said, I've really messed up. I'm sincerely sorry. I was an idiot. You were right. I should have always been on your side. I must have been out of my mind. I think your family was out of their minds from the start. Don't be so cold. Please, I'm begging you. Let's live together again. I'll cut ties with that family for good. I mean it. You're all I have. Oh, really? Too bad. I already have someone else. And even if I didn't, I'd never want to start over with you. As I firmly said this, my ex-husband collapsed to his knees. But any performance to elicit sympathy from me now was futile. Had I been a little less refined, I might have spat on him right there. I left him behind and went on my way home. I never heard from him again after that. The person who informed me about this was the real estate agent who had helped me. The lives of my ex-mother-in-law, ex-husband, and ex-sister-in-law apparently got significantly worse. They constantly blamed each other for their impoverished lifestyle, worsening their relationship. From their house, one could hear arguments and the sound of breaking glass almost every night. They insulted and tormented each other, yet couldn't seem to leave each other. It was nothing short of hell. They became quite isolated in their community, with nobody eager to associate with them. Eventually, they'd probably have to sell the house they can't sell for much and end up homeless with debt. I can clearly imagine the three of them, huddling together under the cold sky, cursing each other. Someday, I'd like to see the miserable state of those who have fallen to rock bottom with my own eyes. Meanwhile, I'm living a blissfully happy life. Thanks to my new partner I once mentioned to my ex-husband. He's a successful salesperson at a major trading company. A mature man who respects others' values, calm and gentle. Plus, he's also divorced like me. Soon, we plan to have a modest wedding. My first marriage was a tremendous ordeal. Even now, I occasionally remember the hardship and almost burst into tears. But whenever I lean on my partner, my heart warms immediately. This is where I belong. It was a long journey, but I finally found my place. Having experienced hardship, I believe I can be kinder to others. I want to live my life positively, using my experiences as a foundation. That's how I feel these days.